I want to start out by saying that I don't know what this thing is. All I know is that I don't want it around me. And I can guarantee that you wouldn't either. Regarding a brief background, I bought my house recently. Nothing special, just a medium-sized place located in a relatively safe suburb. I have a girlfriend, Lara, but she doesn't live with me for personal reasons. At the moment, I'm here by myself. I'm painting the situation because this is the kind of place where kids would go trick-or-treating. Not some decrepit apartment building, not some house in the middle of nowhere. Right here, in suburban America. The first time that it came was 4 days ago at around 9 p.m. I was sitting in my office, working on a document, when I heard a knock at my door and the characteristic little kid voice saying, "Trick or treat." Not some weird, demonic tone. It sounded exactly like a regular, upbeat kid. I just brushed it off as some fundraising thing and decided not to open the door. I was extremely busy, after all. Out of curiosity, I peeked out of my window, watching as the kid, dressed up in some kind of Grim Reaper costume, walked down the street. Off the bat, there were two weird things about this. First of all, there were no adults with him. I didn't get to look at his face, but there was no way he was older than 5. Second of all, he didn't knock on any of the doors. I watched as he walked past every other house until disappearing at a turn. Despite the obscurity of this, it was still a pretty sad sight, but nothing that I thought about for too long. It didn't come back until the following night, and this is where the detour to hell fucking no territory begins. I was out with Lara, and we were both drunk when we got back. It was late as hell, so we decided to put on a horror movie before heading off to bed. About halfway into the film, I heard a knock at the door. An upbeat "trick or treat" followed. Lara was quick to react. "What the fuck?" I remember her whispering to me. I hadn't told her about the first time it happened. I didn't deem it noteworthy after all. I looked at her without saying anything and just put a finger up to my lips. It was barely even a conscious decision. It almost felt instinctive at the time. I got up from the couch and made my way over to the door. Quietly, I looked through the peephole, seeing the same thing in the Grim Reaper outfit from before. It was wearing a mask, so I still couldn't see its face. I really wanted to ignore it, but at the time, I just thought it was a kid, you know? Not to be rude, but what if he wasn't right or something? In any case, I reluctantly opened the door. It didn't move or say anything at first, so I asked it something along the lines of, "Are you okay? Do you need anything?" No response. Alright then. I turned around to face Lara and asked what she was thinking. No response from her either. In fact, she looked horrified. "What's wrong?" "Don't look at it," was her immediate response. "Close the fucking door," she screamed. Her sudden outburst made me jump, but I did what she said. "What the hell was that?" I asked her. She shook her head, still sporting the same horrific expression. "I don't know," she said. I looked back through the peephole, but the only thing that I saw was the kid walking away, back facing towards me. I spent the night trying to convince her to just tell me what she'd seen, but her response was always the same. "I don't know." At a point, she just screamed at me to stop. "I told you, alright? I don't know." That was all I could get out of her. She just didn't know, whatever the hell that meant. She left immediately the next morning, and it was pretty obvious to me that she wasn't coming back for a while. I did get a parting text from her though. "If it comes back, don't open the door." Safe to say, I was reasonably disturbed. Was she playing a prank on me? Seems rather elaborate if you ask me. That couldn't be it. She'd never done anything like that before. Besides, she seemed genuinely terrified. But it was the only explanation that I could muster up at the time, so I went with it. Whenever I would talk to her after that, she never brought it up. I thought that she was trying to pretend like she had nothing to do with it, and had something bigger planned for me later on. I decided to go along with it as well. The following night came and I mentally prepared myself for anything that she was intending to pull. I decided to stay in order to get some work done. It was around midnight, and I was ready to head downstairs to play some Xbox before bed. And then I heard it. Knock, knock. Trick or treat. Now, if Lara was the one doing this, then she would have wanted me to ignore it. But I could catch her off guard if I actually opened the door, right? The kid was probably one of her cousins or something. Weird that she's making him stay out so late. But hey, anything to scare me, I suppose. I looked through my peephole, once again seeing the Grim Reaper costume. I forced myself to laugh. "What's Lara paying you, kid?" I jokingly asked him through the door. What a mistake that was. "Trick or treat." The statement was repeated, louder this time. It caught me so off guard, but I couldn't place why. And then I thought about it. The words didn't seem to have come from the kid's mouth, but from more of a general area behind him, if you get what I'm saying. I didn't react, continuing to look through, having no idea what to anticipate. "Trick or treat." It was deafening the third time. I was jolted backwards before scrambling onto the couch. What the hell? I thought to myself. I remained stiff for the next few moments, petrified of whatever the hell was standing on my doorstep. I waited and waited, but nothing happened. I was about to go back up into my room when I saw the police lights flashing outside. They rang my doorbell and started asking me questions. "Have you seen anything disturbing recently?" "Well, I think some kids are playing a prank on me, but I'm not sure really." What was I supposed to say to him? When I asked him why he'd come, he responded by telling me that the neighbor had called in, saying that she'd seen something horrible standing at my door. No descriptions beyond that, just something horrible. The cop eventually decided that the woman was just off her rocker to call if anything else happened. I thanked him and he left. The next day, I rang my neighbor's doorbell, hoping to get some answers. I could hear somebody moving around inside, but nobody ever came. Looks like she didn't want to tell me anything either. I relayed what happened to Lara, and she was understandably shocked. If this was a prank, then there was no way that she wasn't going to call it off at this point. This brings me up to yesterday night. I can safely say now that this was never a prank. I was in a cab, coming home late after a night out at a bar with some work friends. As we pulled up to my house, I was preparing to drunkenly stumble out when the driver said something that froze my blood. "Who's standing at your door there?" I didn't turn to face what he was referring to. "Keep driving," I told him. He started to ask me what was going on, but I cut in immediately. "Just keep driving." But the guy just wouldn't fucking go. "What do you mean go? It's some kid. It's almost 11 a.m. What's he doing out here? Look, we have to call some..." he stopped mid-sentence. My head was still facing away from whatever the hell was standing at my door, but I could hear the driver's breathing begin to tense. I heard him mutter out, "Fuck," before he slammed the gas. I barely had time to react, my head slamming the seat as he took off. I looked over, witnessing his traumatized expression as he sped away. "What'd you see?" I yelled at him. All that he responded with was incoherent babbling. At moments, I could make out, "No, didn't see," in his speech. I was so focused on trying to get him to talk that I didn't even notice where we were going. Suddenly, I felt the impact. He'd driven us off the road into a local wooded area. I put my seatbelt on, so I was mostly fine. The driver was knocked unconscious though. I dialed 911 and told them what had happened. Well, not exactly what happened. Just something that they would believe. But the driver had gone insane and driven us into a tree. At first, they set their suspicions on me. No surprise there. But that premise was wiped out when the driver woke up, babbling the same shit he'd been babbling in the car. Nobody got any answers out of him. He remained in a petrified, incoherent state. They tested him for drugs and alcohol. Nothing. Eventually, he was whisked away for some psychological tests. While I was getting treated for my minor head wound, a detective visited me. He told me that there were signs of a break-in at my house. Called in at around 1:30 a.m. The window in my basement had been smashed and my front door had been left wide open. In the morning, I went back and looked everything over. It was indeed a mess. My Xbox and laptop were on the ground, and the cash that I hidden in my drawer looked like it had been thrown across my living room, with bills scattered everywhere. But, with all that said, nothing had actually been taken. Beyond the window in the basement, nothing really needed to be fixed either. It looked as if whoever was here was in the process of stealing my shit when they dropped everything and ran out the front door. That was the law enforcement's conclusion anyway. Not very logical, but logic isn't something that I expect at this point. I have a feeling that something else happened. Something far worse. I sat quietly by the door with a shotgun in hand. Halloween had just arrived, and I anxiously awaited the yearly session of trick-or-treat. As always, I turned off all the lights, boarded up the windows, and removed any door signs. It usually did the trick, yet I was on edge. My only window into the outside world was through a tiny peephole in the door. It was enough to witness the hundreds of tiny creatures walking around on the street, all dressed up in various, disfigured costumes. "You better stay the hell away from me," I mumbled to myself. Should any of the horrific small monsters approach my door, I was ready to pull the trigger. Still, that would only provide me a minuscule opportunity to escape. There were simply too many of them, more arriving by each passing year. My best bet would be to remain quiet. One costume kid in particular caught my attention. It was a little faceless creature. I pondered how it would even eat without a mouth, a question that was quickly answered as his abdomen tore open, revealing rows upon rows of razor-sharp teeth. I shivered as my eyes wandered to the next mangled monstrosity, an armless, headless creature dragging itself across the ground with dark tendrils. But something else existed among the hellscape before me. Something moving differently from all the other things. A kid. For reasons I cannot comprehend, a child had ventured into the broken world of Halloween, futilely trying to escape. He wasn't screaming, nor calling out for help. He was simply trying to get away. I just sat there in awe for a few seconds, trying to process the reality of what I was witnessing. My first thought was that it had to be a trick. Then he tripped. With that, something deep within me awoke, an instinct I hadn't felt in years. Without hesitation, I barged out through the front door. The kid wasn't far away, just across the street, but I had completely no confidence that either of us would make it back inside alive. Still, I had to try. I ran through the masked figures, each of them looking like children dressed in creative Halloween costumes. Within a few seconds, I made it to the kid. Before I could pull him up, one of the creatures lunged at us, ready to strike. I pulled up my shotgun and pulled the trigger. Its head, which looked oddly similar to Mickey Mouse, blew open. The creature fell to the ground, but it still wasn't dead. It just lay there, dragging itself around, trying to grasp onto us. Before another one got the chance to strike, I pulled the young boy up from the ground, and we retreated back inside my house. We'd escaped, but it had come at the cost of my hideout. They knew we were inside, and it wouldn't take them long to break down the door. "Why the hell did you go out there?" I asked.
We were going home for curfew, but the monsters came earlier this year,"
the boy cried. He couldn't have been older than 10, and wasn't in particularly good shape. "Where are your parents?" He just cried.
"They're dead. The monsters killed them."
They were already hammering on my door, desperately trying to break through. Despite their childlike appearance, they were unfathomably strong and intelligent.
"What are we going to do?"
the child asked, but my mind couldn't function fast enough. Instead, I just wondered how it had all come to this. The very first creatures had appeared years earlier. We just celebrated Halloween like normal. Decorations covered the neighborhood, and children were running around in hundreds of different costumes. I'd made custom candies that looked like blood-filled syringes. It was just jello inside a plastic tube, but the kids loved it. But that very year, one of them went inexplicably missing. There hadn't been any adults present at the time of disappearance, but according to the other kids around, there had been a faceless child wandering the streets among them. At first, they just assumed it was an incredibly cool costume, but as the skin started sloughing off its body and tendrils started growing out from its head, they tried to escape. Unfortunately, one of the kids got caught in the tendrils and was left behind, never to be seen again. Of course, the government called these kids out as unreliable eyewitnesses and started their own fruitless investigation. As the next year rolled around, adults were required to accompany their children on their yearly round of trick-or-treat. Alas, that year even more children and adults alike vanished from the face of the earth. Then, the next year, and the next. It took far too long before we realized exactly what was going on. Halloween became a forbidden holiday with a mandatory curfew after 5 p.m. For years, those who remained inside were mostly fine, but those dumb enough to venture outside in the dark on October 31st hardly ever came back.
"What are we going to do?"
the kid asked again. Just moments ago, I'd saved his life. Though I feared our safety would be short-lived, I had come up with a plan before the monsters broke through. Had my family still been around, I wouldn't even have opened the door. but they were among the first victims, and I had nothing left to keep me alive. My first idea was to leave through the back door, but then we'd surely get caught in the act. I had to find a way to save the child, even if it meant my own demise. After a moment of contemplation, I decided to go with the only feasible chance to escape. "Come on, kid, it's time to get you back to safety." I led him to the back door, with only a minute left before the creatures got through. "You know the neighborhood, Mr. Jackson?" I asked. The kid nodded. He was one of the few to grant strangers refuge in his house during Halloween. He typically locked the door once nightfall fell over town, but if I distracted the monstrosities that occupied the street, the kid just might have a chance to gain his attention. "I want you to run over to his house, climb up the drain pipe, and knock on his bedroom window. Can you do that?" I asked. Again, he just nodded, panic rising through his body.
What about you?
"I'm gonna stay here, buy you some time. Now, get the hell out of here." I gave the kid a gentle push out the door and pointed my shotgun against the cracking front door. It had just been in time. They had broken through. I fired a round at the first monster, which pushed them all back outside, if only for a second. Still, the shot was loud enough to alert every single monster crowding the neighborhood. As we all rushed inside my house, I retreated upstairs into my bedroom. At a record pace, I boarded up the door, trapping myself inside. I checked my ammunition, knowing I could only take out a few at best. I only have about a minute left before they get through. I am recording this message as my last spoken words on this planet. A voicemail to explain that I didn't give up my life for nothing. I just hope they don't. Being poor is tough, but it hits especially hard during the holidays. Halloween is the first reminder that you don't have the disposable income for your kids' happiness. I took Austin down to a local thrift store we visited frequently. They had a rack of reject costumes from supermarkets, a few cheap latex masks, corny novelty party hats, and one very well-made green and yellow-bellied dragon costume that looked like it could fit Austin, and Austin only, sitting alone next to a golf bag full of hockey sticks. It was painstakingly detailed. It had scales that actually shimmered, interlocked with tiny emerald shields, each with their own special symbol, hard like crystal, lighter than glass or even plastic. It was cute enough to make adults smile, and remarkable enough to finally make my poor son the envy of all the rich kids at his school. My son jumped into it without waiting. I appreciated the workmanship on the rubber sword feet, individual fingers with claws and lifelike tail and jaw. No stitches, no tag. Custom, handmade. Austin took the head of the dragon and slid it over his own, his bright smile eclipsed by the black mesh inside the dragon's open mouth. He begged me to get it. It wasn't cheap, at least for us, but well worth it for Austin. Austin wore the costume all day from then on. That was the 27th. When we went to his first friend's costume party of many, he was the hit of everyone. So it was no wonder why he loved the dragon so much that he wanted to sleep in it. Seeing as how it was one giant plush and armored sleeping bag, we agreed. It seemed like we kinda had to. The kid did all his chores and homework in that costume, as if he was trying to buy a favor with us before he asked if he could keep the costume on. We said yes. Even at school, he could wear it into Halloween. Austin's school is very open-minded. The students loved the costume as much as everybody else. Even the teacher was fine with letting Austin keep it on during school hours. It was the first week where Austin the Dragon didn't get in trouble. Austin even got a rare A on his spelling test during the week before Halloween. He ate his veggies and brushed his teeth through a slot in the mesh that was hard to see at times, and it sounded like he was showering every night without us needing to tell him to. Why not let the kid have some fun? Austin's last Halloween is my bet for the best Halloween nights any kid has ever had. Every house was his own little amusement park of treats and decorations, almost all of them for Austin the Dragon, a legend that every kid spread at school. It seemed that every adult played along as knights or maidens or queens, and even some of the other kids copied his costume, leading a band of dragons to terrorize the neighborhoods looking for chocolate late into the weekday night. What we feared would happen came true on the 1st of November. Austin refused to get out of the costume. He was never a shrieker or a kicker before, but he was when my wife or I tried to unzip the back or reach for the head of the dragon. After an hour of arguing and tears, we finally caved and sent our kid out to school looking like a fool. When my wife called me that afternoon saying it was for school and that it was an emergency, all I could imagine was a group of bullies beating up my son in his costume. I rushed all the way to the school nurse's room, where I saw my son on his stomach, laying on the reclined bed, still in the dragon. The nurse told us that a kickball had flown over the fence and bounced off a truck's bumper, launching the ball into a lamppost and then to the back of my son's head as he was walking out of lunch. A strange event, a stroke of bad luck, half of the storm and all of that. The nurse did have good news, said the helmet inside the costume may have saved his life, as she could still feel a pulse even with the costume on. Austin was unconscious and may have been hemorrhaging. We needed to get it off him. The helmet was stuck tight, so were the side and bottom zippers. The nurse had to ask a custodian for a pair of pliers to get a better grip on the zipper tabs. The nurse clamped onto it and tugged. My wife helped her. I should have left it alone, but I helped the two of them. With all three of us straining, the zipper peeled down, and slowly, like an embedded knife drawing through a torso, with sound that reminded me of wet wood splitting. The space above the zipper split open to a deep crimson gash, flashing bones, muscles, and organs. My wife screamed as the nurse yanked up the zipper up alone, closing the oozing, bleeding zippers as best she could as we picked them up. We followed our son in the facility school van, emergency ambulance to the nearest ER, and waited until dark, until 2 women and 2 men entered our son's ER wearing medical scrubs that were bright white, while the others wore powder green. They each carried an official kind of walk, kind of a march, with matching bright blue-soled nurses' shoes. They looked odd, like actors in a play, but as out of place as they seemed, this new crew gave my wife and I new hope. 10 minutes later, 2 of them walked out, one carrying the costume of a dragon, the other the head. One said to the other, "Just a little more time and his meal would have been gone. Shame, still. I can't believe they let one of us get all the way to the thrift store," as we walked off down the hall, ignoring us. My wife followed them while I waited by the door for the other 2. When the 3 of them left, a man exited the ER in a hurry. The last woman spoke in a strange accent to the man that left, like she learned English from a speech bot. "You can't do that here." The man's voice was quick and sleek.
"Rules don't apply here, man-eater. This is just the cattle pen."
I physically stopped the man with my arms. His brown eyes ruffled and shot down at me in indignant fury as I asked, "Do you know anything about my son, Austin?"
"Why would I know anything about your son?"
The doctor wore one of those metal reflective discs on his head and a stethoscope that belonged on a TV set. His mask hid everything but those angry eyes. He smelled like gasoline made out of lime. I asked him what he was doing in the AR with that group, and who he was.
"Do you think I wear this mask just to advertise who I am?"
He broke the contact with my hand and walked out of sight. I was so pissed I almost followed him before my wife running back came to me, breathless. She said those doctors stole the costume by walking out of the hospital, getting into a parked car, and driving away. We came back to ER and found the group standing outside, waiting for us. The doctors tried to explain that they didn't know what to do, as the costume appeared to be fused with Austin's skin, and no matter where they cut into Austin. Nobody knew who the group of strange four were or how they got the costume off. My wife and I pushed our way in past the barricade of bodies to see the half-digested bloody mess from hell all over the operating table and room. In the mess was Austin's watch, pickled and shriveled like it had been sitting in stomach acid for nearly a week. I ran through the ER so quickly that my shoes flipped off halfway through the sprint. The first thing my eyes landed on was the blue bathroom symbol, and I bolted there to throw up and have my breakdown. The men's room door was propped open, and I had no shoes left to make a sound. That's why the arrogant doctor who blew past me didn't stop pissing. He didn't hear me or see me. He was standing at one of the toilet stalls with his bright blue-soled shoes, standing half in and out between an open door, the front of his head out of view. I saw what looked like his deflated face and neck resting on his shoulders like a coat hood not in use. He then grabbed his own face with fake lips and empty eye holes and pulled it out of view into the stall as he put it on. I heard what might have been a zipper closing up, and I swore I saw his body jerk up a bit, like he just noticed I was standing there, watching everything. I bolted out, back to the arms of my crying wife. We called the staff and we waited for the man in the men's room to exit. When no one did, we searched the place and found nothing but the toilet he was using, filled with blood and half-digested chunks of bone.